Senator Chuck Schumer's office. We are friends of Cuba. We are here to state our opposition to our government's policy and to call for Schumer to do the right thing and to take Robert Menendez off of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which has a lot of power, has really continued to put the foot of the U.S. government on the neck of the Cuban people, and we're here to exercise our opposition to our government's policy and to call for the removal of Menendez from this committee.
That's right.
That's right. No.
Here with a group that recently returned from Cuba, and we're here to deliver this letter to Senator Schumer demanding that he ask that Menendez step off the Foreign Relations Committee, considering that he's going through his second investigation in only 5 years, and that he has abused his power to push for aggressive policies towards Cuba. So I don't know if this is the senator in the office today?
He's currently not here right now, but I can make sure that I take the letter and pass it on to him, as well as our staffer that covers our policy.
Yes, that would be great. And
Is the staff that covers the policy here? Is there somebody that we can actually, we've come a long way. We're constituents. We want to be able to talk to someone if that's possible.
Yeah, so I don't think they're available right now, but what I can do is get you our scheduling email so you can reach out through there, because I know they usually fill just back to back with meetings. But like I said, I can get you our scheduling email, have you reach out through that, and set up a meeting time.
And that's the legislative director? Who would that be?
So that would be through our scheduling team, and I would send it to a legislative staffer, whether it's legislative director, legislative assistant, or anyone on the trial.
So we're able to leave this letter though with you and
I'll make sure I'll just relay it throughout the rest of the team, including that staffer.
is Yasid here?
I don't think he's in right now, but I can give you the first person.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, and I think some people have messages for the senator as well, if anyone wants to share.
I just came back from Cuba and I'm heartbroken. And have you ever been to Cuba? And we really want the senator to understand that we are friends. This is our family that is really being harmed irreparably, by a policy that just is sanctions and just trying to suffocate the Cuban people. And so we've taken time out of our busy schedules to come to be here to protest what we feel is an incredible injustice. And so that's the message that, and I'm speaking very emotionally because I was just there. And I saw the way in which our government's policy is strangling innocent Cubans, children, elders, folk who are struggling to just get, to live their lives. And the narrative is that it's how horrible the Cuban government is. And we're saying we as U.S. citizens have a right and a responsibility to talk about the impact that our government's policies are having on regular everyday Cubans. So I express that to you. I know that you're not the senator, you're not the legislator, but I hope that you can convey the passion in which we feel that this is a policy that needs to be reviewed, needs to be changed, and we feel that Robert Menendez is not a person who is fairly looking at that policy in a way that's going to be beneficial to the Cuban people.
Absolutely. We have groups come in pretty frequently, so I'm always appreciative of when you will drop in, because first, you're educating us, and that's always big, right? I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And secondly, part of our job is to be a megaphone for you all, so when you come in and speak to us, that allows us to amplify issues even if we're passionate about. We can't speak in our own matter, we can speak for you all and amplify your voice, so absolutely.
Do you have contact information?
Yes, I do. And do we have contact information either from yourselves or
Yeah, so we have the scheduling email. We can't give out our contact information, but if you want to reach out through the scheduling email that he has on his card, request any meetings, and then if you give us your contact information, we can accompany that with the letter that you have, and we'll give that to the legislative team and the leadership on the matter.
Thank you.
So there's several of us here with different organizations. And
I'm here representing Code Pink, which is a feminist anti-war organization, and we've done work in Cuba for years, and we're extremely concerned about the power and the abuse, the abuse of power that Menendez is doing towards Cuba. He opposes any legislation that calls for normalization or even just lifting small sanctions and making small changes to the Trump administration's policies. We've been following how he attacks anyone who is open to engaging with the Cuban people and allowing the people in the US and in Cuba to exchange. And we don't think he should be holding that powerful position. I mean, it's not just that, but in addition to that, he's being investigated, as I mentioned before, for the second time for corruption scandals. So we don't feel represented by someone like that, and but as people that care about foreign policy towards other countries.
No, so here, let's do this. I will, look official, but I'll have you all write your name and organizations, and I'll type it up and add it along with the letter and everything, so that, you know, make sure everyone's heard and everyone's seen.
Thank you. And yeah, we're here with Code Pink, but we're representing like well over 60 different organizations. 4 of us are the co-chairs of the National Network on Cuba, which is a coalition united around ending the blockade. And what we really believe is that the blockade doesn't represent the democratic will of the US people. It's being upheld by a very small group of people like Menendez who don't speak for us. And over 90 city councils and labor unions just in the past couple years have passed resolutions demanding that Biden lift the blockade and take Cuba off the state sponsors of terrorism list. Just a couple weeks ago, the DC Council unanimously passed one of these resolutions. And not only is it, a violation of our democratic will and the Cuban people's democratic will, but 96% of countries on earth vote every year in the UN to condemn the blockade and tell the US to end this policy. So we appreciate you listening to us, and we hope that we can actually work to make sure our voices and the voices of the US and Cuban people are being represented in this policy towards Cuba.
And if I can just add that what my sister Carla just said is happening in New York City as well. The New York City Council, after a lot of work that we've been engaged in, is also prepared to pass a resolution saying it's ridiculous to maintain this policy. So it's across the board that these resolutions are being put into place.
Sorry, I'm adjusting everything.
Sure, if you have any questions, I know it's a lot. But,
This is all part of the whole, I don't know what I don't know.
I hear you.
Introduce this issue.
I really, that's great. You should send information. Like, for example, Cuba provides medical school scholarships. There's 220 U.S. graduates serving in countless communities across the U.S. giving back because they've been able to go to school, medical school, and not have to worry about a debt. They're going cost-free, with the only understanding being that they return and serve in underserved communities, and several of them in New York. So we need to talk with the senator because I work in New York, I live in New Jersey, I'm passionate about this, and I think that that's just me, and I'm just one of many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this whole week is there's gonna be multiple actions here in DC in support of Cuba, in support of lifting the blockade and taking Cuba off the state sponsor of terrorism list, which it shouldn't be in the first place. I don't know if you all know, but the Trump administration added it like weeks before leaving office to, make it harder for the Biden administration to do anything on Cuba. But Cuba's still on the list, and it's really hurting the Cuban people. So that's why we feel like it's so important to elevate these issues, because it is our policies that are directly impacting the well-being of the Cuban people. So we're gonna have a rally outside the White House, and there's people coming from all over the country, which means that there's popular support for a change in policy on these issues.
You can keep talking to me. I'm taking down everything you're saying. As well.
Okay, good. So we talk about how it's hurting the Cuban people, but to get specific, it's restricting imports of certain food, of medicines, critical things that people need to survive. So like basic antihistamines, pain medication. It's also prohibiting United States people from engaging in cultural and medical exchange. Cuba has a lung cancer vaccine. They developed 5 COVID vaccines independently despite the U.S. economic blockade. So that blockade is restricting trade with other countries as well, and they're penalized if they try to engage with Cuba. So black farmers in the United States also want to trade with Cuba. There are vast economic opportunities that would support the benefit of both of our nations, and I feel that it's just ridiculous because it's been going on for 60 plus years. Old Cold War policies that really need to be revisited, but also it just is limiting us from doing what we need to do. I think it's important to include that in the notes. Like, there are people that could benefit from this medical care, can benefit from this amazing educational system as well, that we have not been able to do that because of these policies, especially the state sponsors of terrorism list, because that's also keeping economic exchange from happening. So that's what I got.
Well, I don't want to just, but I just want to say, we think, we can because we believe that Chuck Schumer wants to do the right thing. I mean, there have been many positions that he's taken that we've been appreciative of. This is something we hope that he can hear. We are just the people in this room, but we represent, as has been said, many people who are opposed to the
45 million.
45, right?
Yeah.
That are opposed to this, and as we said, all of the different resolutions. So the point is that there is a very amplified voice that is in opposition to this embargo blockade policy, and we need to, as a leading Democrat, we're hopeful that Senator Schumer can take a page out of the book of Obama, who at least was open to trying to provide some kind of opening communication, right? Isn't that what we teach our children? To communicate rather than to continue to fight. And so that's really what we're hoping that Chuck Schumer can hear that message.
Just be open to.
Yeah, to be open to dialogue, to be open to communication with our Cuban friends and family, and not to just be stuck in that same Cold War, cycle that is not benefiting anybody. Us, as has been mentioned, there are people here in the United States who would benefit as well from a change in policy, and certainly our Cuban friends, and we call them friends and family. Their family are being hurt by this policy. So to be open. To dialogue and to communicating, and we're happy to share information that we've got.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I got your clear ask, so when I relay this, I can say, to the senator, this is what they were asking for.
And I'd like to ask for a meeting with the senator.
Okay, did you get the card with I can give you
Good.
another one?
Okay.
And that's where you would request the meeting. We have a
Okay.
whole scheduling team, and it gets you set up with the right people
Okay.
and everything like that.
So whether it's here or in New York.
Yeah, we have,
Okay.
most of our legislative staff is here
Is
though.
here, okay.
But they make sure that you have the right, policy experts to speak with.
Good. Thank you.
Of course.
And y'all should go to Cuba too.
Yeah.
So you should ask the senator to
Yeah,
send you.
I'm not far. I'm from Florida, so.
See?
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
It's just like less than 90 miles.
You need. It's so close. It's so
Yeah, it is
close.
really close.
Yeah.
You got to see the truth for yourself, because the propaganda that we're fed, all the stuff that we saw before we went there, it changes your entire perspective. And especially like seeing the direct effects of everything we mentioned on the people there in their daily lives. And then for me, it's particularly important if I'm fighting for the liberation of Black people in the United States, seeing the Afro-Cuban struggle there as well. It's amplified the effects of all these things that we mentioned. So you have to see it for yourself. We can tell you all day, but it's important for people that are in charge of our policy to go and really see the reality of the situation so that they can come back and advocate for the right things.
Yeah. And our ability to go should be open. We should be able to freely travel to Cuba. The fact that you have to fit into 12 travel categories, you have to make all these arrangements. You're not allowed to stay in 90% of the hotels. You're not allowed to use, U.S. dollar to support any government-owned institution, which is a majority. That makes it impossible or hard for the average, U.S. citizen that wants to go to Cuba. Maybe they just want to go to the beach. Maybe they want to engage, but they don't even have the right or the freedom to travel. So, that is impeding on our freedom to exchange, but also for us to get a sense of what Cuba's really about, you know, so that keeps those narratives strong, and we're here to fight against that. What do you know about the state sponsors of terrorism list?
I don't know much. I do know that Cuba has been on that list, and I know that it has impacted a lot of the community, especially, like I said, being from Florida, like I'm very aware of that. But, and I know that it's been a long-standing thing, and how it hurts the communities, not only in the United States, but also individuals, families that are, and friends that are back in Cuba. So, and how it hurts with trade with other nations and stuff like that, and how it's really just holding the country back. So,
Yeah, it really isolates Cuba's ability to trade. You know, when they were added to the state sponsors of terrorism list, which I have a zine right here that can explain it to you, right? But there was already limited trade because of the blockade that's been going on for 60 years. But when they got added to the state sponsors of terrorism list, then 30 different banking institutions, major banking institutions, quit doing transactions with Cuba. Then now from 40 different countries within the EU, those citizens who could freely travel to the US now have to get a visa if they want to come to the US if they've been to Cuba, and if they've been to Cuba in the last 10 years. So it's retroactive as well, right? So it's hurting not only us, but then people within the EU to be able to freely go to Cuba. I mean, how does that even, you know, make sense? And so when we talk about these shortages of medicine and everything else, you know, it also created, exacerbated a fuel crisis, right? Which isn't just going to and from work. It's impeding the ability for children to get to school, for sanitation to go around the island, for mosquito trucks. So right now is dengue season. And so when the when the fumigation trucks,
mosquito-borne and infection or something.
yeah, when the fumigation trucks can't go and spray regularly as they do, that created a dengue outbreak. And dengue is a deadly virus that is transmitted by mosquitoes. So it's actually killing the Cuban people. Yeah, I mean, we had a friend that died because of dengue, and it's like when you look at that, they have the most doctors per capita in the world. It's not a lack of training or knowledge; it's literally lack of resources that's caused by the state sponsors of terrorism list and the blockade. So, you know, it's like they run on this base that they're trying to help the Cuban people, that they're trying to free them, but in reality, when we look at how the blockade is working, it's actually limiting the Cuban people's right to live daily lives and to survive. So you should read that scene. We can read it, we can read it together. Yeah. And then pass
We
it
can
over
send you one digitally. That one's been in my bag a little. Well,
your accent. Nice to meet you, I'm Angie.
Yeah.
You should read this. Y'all can read it together. I know you got a lot of time on your hands, but it is really quick. You know.
Lastly, look, intergenerational, multi-ethnic, I mean, this is Cuba. This is what Cuba looks like. This is why we feel the way that we do. Yeah. I'll stop. 'Cause I'll just keep going.
Yeah,
and I will keep going. You'll be like, you gotta go.
Yeah.
I completely understand.
Come to Cuba.
Yeah, y'all can come with
You missed
us.
that memo. You should come.
We'll get you there.
Yeah.
See it for yourself.
We have
But,
to start.
yeah, that was like star emails. If you're interested to know, you know, I mean, you do this work, it's important for you to know what's happening, right? This is more than just sitting at a desk, you're upholding things as well. So know what you're doing.
Yeah. So we'll
Continue to our meetings.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
listening to us, and I really do hope that the message gets to the senator, and that that there's a lot of people who are really concerned about the lack of action on Cuba policy that's really affecting the Cuban people.
And us too.
It's affecting us too.
Yeah.
especially after we thought we were told that there would be changes under the current administration, the Biden administration, but he's held on to the same draconian policies that the predecessor. What happened? And so we're looking to people like senior senators like Chuck Schumer to help us, draw attention to this. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming in.
Mhm.